It was my 72nd birthday, and for the first time in my life, I felt like an uninvited guest at my own celebration. The morning sun spilled through my lace curtains, painting soft golden patterns on the worn-out floor of my little kitchen. I had baked a chocolate cake the night before, my favorite since childhood, because it reminded me of my mother. I wore my best lavender blouse and pearl earrings, the same ones my late husband had given me on our 40th anniversary. They made me feel like myself again, like I still belonged somewhere. My daughter Susan had called earlier that week, saying, "Mom, we're throwing you a birthday lunch. Don't bring anything, just yourself." Her voice sounded cheerful, but there was something distant about it, like a smile hiding behind a wall. I brushed the thought aside, convinced that I was just overthinking things. After all, Susan had always been a good daughter. Or so I wanted to believe. When I arrived at her suburban home, balloons fluttered lazily in the breeze and the sound of laughter floated from the backyard. The smell of barbecue filled the air. My heart swelled with joy as I stepped through the gate, holding my homemade cake in both trembling hands. "Happy birthday, Grandma," my grandkids shouted, running toward me. Their arms wrapped around my waist, their faces full of innocent love that made my old bones feel young again. For a fleeting moment, I thought, maybe everything is okay after all. But that illusion shattered almost as soon as I walked inside. Susan's husband, Mark, barely lifted his eyes from the grill. "Hey Evelyn," he muttered without a smile, "you made it." Made it. As if showing up to my own birthday was some kind of inconvenience. Susan came over, kissed me on the cheek quickly, then turned back to her phone. "Mom, the cake looks nice. But we already have one. You didn't have to go through all that trouble." Her tone stung more than I cared to admit. "It wasn't any trouble," I said softly. But she was already walking away. Lunch came and went. The food was good, the laughter loud, but none of it felt meant for me. They talked about vacations, new jobs, and the kids' sports tournaments, conversations that carried on around me but never included me. I smiled when expected, nodded politely, and tried to ignore the ache in my chest. When it was time for presents, Susan clapped her hands. "Okay everyone, Grandma's turn." The kids giggled and brought out a small silver box wrapped in shiny paper. "Open it, Grandma," they said in unison, their eyes gleaming with excitement. I smiled, genuinely this time. "Oh, you didn't have to," I began, but they insisted. My hands, fragile and veined, carefully untied the ribbon. I lifted the lid, and froze. Inside was a single card, handwritten in my daughter's elegant cursive. At first, I thought it was a sweet letter. But then I read the words. "Dear Mom, we think it's time you start thinking about the next chapter of your life. There's a wonderful senior residence not far from here where you can make new friends and have all the care you need. We'll visit you all the time. Love, Susan and Mark." My vision blurred. The words burned into my heart like hot iron. I heard a giggle, then another. Mark chuckled awkwardly. "Come on, it's not that bad, Evelyn. We thought it'd be funny to give it as a gift, you know, lighten the subject." "Lighten the subject?" I whispered. My voice trembled like thin glass. Susan sighed. "Mom, please don't overreact. We've talked about this before. You're living alone, and it's just time. We can't keep worrying about you all the time." I could feel everyone's eyes on me, their pity, their impatience. The grandkids looked confused. "Is Grandma moving away?" one of them asked. "We'll talk about it later," Susan said quickly. My lips quivered, but I forced a smile. "Thank you," I said faintly. "What a thoughtful gift." My fingers closed the box. I set it down gently on the table, stood up, and walked away as quietly as I could, my heart breaking with each step. That night, alone in my small house, I sat in the dark staring at that silver box. Jadente itenating. I could still hear their laughter echoing in my mind, still see the dismissive glance Susan gave me when I tried to speak. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger, an old woman who had outlived her usefulness. For the first time in years, I let myself cry, not the soft, quiet tears of loneliness I usually shed, but deep, raw sobs that came from the part of me that still remembered being loved. When my husband John died 15 years ago, I promised myself I would stay strong for Susan. I gave her everything I had, my time, my savings, my heart. When she needed help paying for college, I took out a second mortgage. When her first marriage fell apart, I moved in to care for her kids so she could rebuild her life. When she remarried, I sold my house and bought a smaller one nearby just to be close to her. And now, after all those years, my gift was a suggestion to go live with strangers.
But beneat de grief, something else stirred, à qui, simmering Angers.
I realized I had spent so long being grateful for crumbs that I'd forgotten I deserved more. I wasn't weak. I wasn't useless. I was just surrounded by people who had forgotten my worth. I looked at that silver box again and whispered, maybe this really is a gift. Because it was, in a cruel, twisted way.
It woke me up.
The next morning, I made coffee, put on my glasses, and sat down with my old laptop. I began looking through my bank accounts, the ones Susan had long forgotten about. In Susan's letter I wrote, "My dearest daughter, thank you for reminding me that life isn't over until we decide it is. You may not have meant to hurt me, but you did, and in doing so, you gave me clarity. I have spent my whole life giving, hoping that one day you would see me not as a burden but as the mother who gave you everything. I no longer need that validation. I am choosing peace over pain, freedom over fear. Don't worry about me. I will be fine, happier than you can imagine. Take care of your family, and teach your children to cherish the people who love them before it's too late. With love, Mom." To my grandkids, I wrote, "My darlings, Grandma loves you more than words can say. Always be kind, always listen to the hearts of others, and never let the world make you forget the value of family.
I'm not leaving because I don't love you.
I'm leaving because I need to remember who I am." I left both letters on my kitchen counter next to the unopened silver box, tied with its ribbon once more. Then before the sun rose, I locked my door, placed my key under the mat, and drove away. The highway was empty, the sky blushing with the first light of dawn. For the first time in years, I didn't feel old, I felt alive. When I reached Vermont, the lake was as beautiful as I remembered. The air smelled of pine and freedom. The caretaker had kept the cabin in perfect condition. It looked almost exactly as it had the last time John and I were there. I stood by the water, watching the reflection of the trees ripple across the surface, and whispered, "I'm home." Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I painted, I read, I walked along the shore at sunrise. I met neighbors who invited me for tea and treated me like an equal, not an inconvenience. Slowly, I began to heal. Every now and then, I received a letter from Susan. The first one was angry, accusing me of being ungrateful, of abandoning her. I didn't reply. The next was confused, asking where I was, telling me the kids missed me. I didn't reply to that either. The third letter came months later. It was short.
"Mom, I'm sorry.
I didn't realize how much I hurt you. The kids ask about you every day. We'd love to visit, if you'll let us." I read that one twice, then folded it carefully and placed it inside the same silver box I had brought with me. For the first time, I smiled at it, not with bitterness, but gratitude. Because that box, cruel as it once was, had given me back my life. A year passed. On my 73rd birthday, I sat by the lake with a cup of tea, the sun warm on my face. My phone buzzed. It was a video call from Susan and the kids. "Happy birthday, Grandma," they shouted, their faces glowing on the screen. Susan's eyes were red, but her smile was real. "Mom, we sent you something," she said softly. "It's not much, but it's from the heart." Later that afternoon, a small package arrived. It was wrapped in lavender paper, tied with a silver ribbon. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside was a photo frame with a picture of all of us, me, Susan, Mark, and the kids, taken years ago before everything fell apart. On the back, Susan had written, "We finally understand what you meant by love." Tears filled my eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of pain. I placed the photo on my bedside table and whispered, "Thank you." Because life has a strange way of teaching lessons. Sometimes, love returns only after you've learned to stop begging for it. And as I watched the golden light fade across the lake, I realized that maybe the birthday gift I never opened was never meant to hurt me, it was meant to set me free.